Every month, a stranger transferred $7,000 to me. This went on for 4 years. I never knew who he was. But one day, the bank called to say he had transferred $74 million to me and left a message. When I read that message, my entire world turned upside down. My name is Nia. I am 32 years old. As an organic skincare brand founder, I thought I escaped my family's toxicity, but maintained occasional contact. Last Sunday, they invited me to a lavish charity gala. Between champagne and caviar, my mother smirked. You know, Nia, you are lucky we include you. Pity goes a long way. I simply sipped my water and smiled. That night, I watched their financial empire crumble. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Subscribe if you have stood up to a toxic family. Growing up in Atlanta, image was everything. My mother Beatrice chased elite status ruthlessly. I was the dark-skinned daughter with natural hair who refused to conform to her rigid beauty standards. My sister Jasmine was the golden child. With her lighter skin and career as a luxury broker, she was the perfect trophy. Jasmine married Terrence, an arrogant investment banker. Together they were Atlanta royalty. I was just the embarrassment who mixed lotions. The charity gala ballroom was dripping in crystal chandeliers. I was quietly organizing a small display table for my skincare brand in a dark corner, a supposed favor from my mother that felt more like a cruel joke. The table was tucked away near the kitchen, barely visible to the wealthy guests. I was arranging glass bottles when a cold splash hit my back. Red wine soaked through my beige blazer. I turned to see Jasmine holding an empty goblet, a malicious smirk on her face. Clean it up, Nia, she laughed loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. You always were good at scrubbing away my messes. And take off that cheap blazer. You are embarrassing Terrence in front of the city councilman. Terrence stood beside her, swirling his whiskey. He looked at me with utter disdain. Seriously, Nia, you could have worn something tailored. We are trying to network and you look like you just came from a farmer's market. Before I could respond, fingers dug into my arm. It was my mother Beatrice. She yanked me away from the table and pulled me into a secluded hallway. Her face was twisted in a scowl reserved only for me. You are a walking disaster, she hissed, pushing me against the wall. I invite you to one event, and you manage to make a spectacle of yourself. I did not do anything, I said, keeping my voice remarkably steady. Jasmine poured her drink on me on purpose. Beatrice waved her hand. Jasmine is stressed managing multi-million-dollar properties. You should apologize to her for being in her way, but since you are here, make yourself useful. She reached into her clutch and slapped a folded paper against my chest. It was an invoice from the catering company. The total was exactly $25,000. I looked up at her, confused. What is this? Your contribution, she said coldly. Your lotion mixing hobby needs to pay rent for the shame your dark skin and nappy hair brought to my pedigree. You owe me this. Pay the caterers tonight, or I will make sure suppliers in Atlanta refuse to work with your brand. Her colorism was nothing new, but weaponizing it to extort me was a new low. She marched back into the ballroom, her public smile reappearing instantly. I stood looking at the massive invoice. My business was doing well, but dropping $25,000 would hurt my operational budget. Still, the alternative was dealing with Beatrice's wrath, which could legitimately harm my supply chain. I walked toward the front lobby, pulling out my phone to call my business account manager to authorize the transfer. As I approached the quiet reception area, my phone began ringing in my hand. It was a private number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello, is this Nia Pierce? A crisp, professional voice asked. Yes, speaking. My name is Richard Sterling. I am the Senior Wealth Manager at Apex Financial. I am calling regarding the monthly transfers you have been receiving for the past 4 years. My breath caught in my throat. For 4 years exactly, $7,000 appeared in my checking account on the first of every month. The sender was always listed as anonymous. That money had been my lifeline. It allowed me to rent my first commercial lab space, buy organic ingredients, and keep my business afloat when no bank would give a young black woman a loan. I had spent countless hours wondering who my secret benefactor was. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I received them. Who is sending the money? There was a brief pause on the line. Ma'am, the anonymous sender passed away earlier this week. However, per his explicit legal instructions, he just wired $74 million into a private trust solely in your name. The lobby seemed to spin around me. I leaned against a marble pillar to steady myself. $74 million. The number echoed in my head, too massive to comprehend. Are you joking? I asked. This has to be a scam. I assure you this is real, Mr. Sterling replied. The funds have cleared. The trust is completely active and under your sole control. The benefactor also left a secure message for you to read immediately upon transfer. I am sending it to your email now. My phone vibrated with a new email notification. I opened it with trembling fingers. The message was short, but every word struck me like lightning. They stole your past, Nia. But they will never touch your future. Your mother took me from you, but she cannot take my empire. I have watched you build your business with pride. Use this power to claim what is yours. Your father, Julian Pierce. Tears blurred my vision as I read the name. Julian Pierce. My mother always told me my father was a deadbeat who abandoned us before I was born. She claimed taking her new husband's last name was a favor to me. I grew up believing I was the unwanted offspring of a failure. But Julian Pierce was not a failure. He was a pioneer in logistics and technology, a self-made billionaire whose company Julian Pierce Holdings was legendary. My father had not abandoned me. He had been watching over me from the shadows, funding my dreams when my own mother tried to crush them. And now he had handed me the keys to his entire empire. I am here, I replied, wiping my eyes. My voice was no longer shaking. A profound, icy calm washed over me. The girl who walked into this lobby feeling humiliated and small was gone. I was a multi-millionaire, the sole heir to a corporate dynasty, and I finally had the power to fight back. I need you to process a payment of $25,000 to the catering company tonight, I told Mr. Sterling. Use the new trust. Send me the login credentials for the primary holding accounts. I want to see exactly what I own. Certainly, ma'am. The credentials will be in your inbox momentarily. I hung up the phone and stood up straight. The wine stain on my back suddenly felt completely irrelevant. I walked back into the ballroom with my head held high. I spotted Beatrice standing near the buffet chatting with Jasmine and Terrence. I walked directly up to them and dropped my heavy metal black card onto the catering invoice sitting on the table. The bill is paid, I said smoothly. Consider it a parting gift. Beatrice looked at the card, then at me with a triumphant smirk. See, I knew you had some money stashed away. I did not react to her insult. My eyes drifted to Terrence. I was not paying attention to the conversation. He was staring at his phone, his face pale and sweating profusely. His thumbs were flying across the screen with desperate speed. At that exact moment, a notification chimed on my phone. I glanced down at the screen. It was an alert from the new banking application Mr. Sterling had just set up for me. Alert: unauthorized access attempt on Julian Pierce Holdings by Terrence Vaughn. I looked up from my phone back to my arrogant brother-in-law. Terrence was desperately trying to log into the corporate accounts of the massive empire I just inherited. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind. My own mother extorted me, my sister humiliated me, but Terrence was trying to rob my dead father. They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with anymore. I smiled, took a sip of champagne, and prepared to burn their perfect world to the ground. The next morning, the bright Atlanta sun streamed heavily through the tall industrial windows of my laboratory. The familiar scent of raw shea butter, cold-pressed rosehip oil, and lavender absolute usually brought me immense peace. Today it felt like battle armor. I stood over my stainless steel mixing counter, carefully measuring a new botanical extract. My mind was still racing from the explosive revelations of the previous night. $74 million, a massive corporate empire, a biological father who had watched over me from the shadows, and an arrogant brother-in-law desperately trying to hack into funds that now legally belonged to me. I had barely slept, spending the early hours of the morning reviewing the staggering financial portfolios my banker had securely transmitted to my encrypted drive. The sheer magnitude of Julian Pierce Holdings was breathtaking. Real estate properties, supply chain logistics networks, offshore trusts, and venture capital firms all sat firmly under my name. I was no longer the struggling entrepreneur begging for vendor extensions. I was the apex predator in an ecosystem my toxic family thought they ruled. The heavy metal door of my laboratory swung open with a loud clank, shattering my intense focus. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The sharp scent of overpriced designer cologne announced his arrival before he even spoke a single word. DeAndre, my ex-husband. 3 years ago, DeAndre had packed his custom-tailored suits and walked out of our marriage without a second thought. He told me I was wasting my entire life mixing potions in a damp basement. He said he needed a woman who understood corporate ascendance, a woman who looked the part of an Atlanta elite, not someone who smelled like essential oils and worked 18-hour days to build a dream. He considered pathetic. He had promptly leveraged his fraternity connections to land a vice president title at Terrence's boutique investment firm. DeAndre was the ultimate social climber, a man who worshipped status above all else and discarded anyone who could not elevate his public image. Seeing him stand in my sanctuary filled me with a cold, righteous anger. This was the man who had promised to support my ambitions, only to abandon me when the startup phase became too difficult for his fragile ego. He had left me to handle the mounting debts alone, taking our shared savings to fund his new wardrobe and elite club memberships. Now he was standing in the very business he had mocked, trying to steal the success I had bled to build. I kept my eyes fixed on my digital scale as his expensive Italian leather shoes clicked sharply against the polished concrete floor. He walked right up to my workspace, acting with a deeply unearned familiarity. He leaned against the sterile counter, flashing that perfectly practiced, blindingly white smile he used to charm wealthy investors. I tossed a thick 30-page legal document right next to my sterilized glass beakers. The bold heading read, Non-Disclosure and Intellectual Property Transfer Agreement. I slowly wiped my hands on a clean microfiber cloth and looked at him in total silence. He adjusted his silk tie, looking around my modest laboratory with undisguised pity. Terrence wants to buy your little formula for $15,000. DeAndre said, his voice dripping with absolute condescension. Sign it, Nia. You are drowning in debt, and let us face facts, you are not smart enough to scale this operation. I am doing you a massive favor by convincing Terrence to offer this much money. You can finally pay off your annoyed suppliers and maybe get a decent apartment in a better neighborhood. I stared at the contract, then back at the man I once thought I loved. $15,000 for a proprietary melanin-rich skincare formula that had taken me 5 grueling years to perfect. A formula that had a current market valuation of at least $2 million even before my sudden inheritance. Terrence was trying to steal my life's work for pennies, using my opportunistic ex-husband as the delivery boy. Before I could tell DeAndre exactly where to shove his insulting contract, the laboratory door opened again. The sharp clicking of designer heels echoed loudly through the space. My mother Beatrice walked in. She was wearing a pristine white pantsuit, looking as though she had just stepped off the cover of a wealthy lifestyle magazine. She walked to stand shoulder to shoulder with DeAndre, forming a united front of pure toxicity. Her presence here was no coincidence. This was a highly coordinated ambush. Beatrice looked around my laboratory with absolute disgust, wrinkling her nose as if the scent of natural ingredients deeply offended her refined sensibilities. Sign the paper to your brother-in-law, she commanded. Her tone was not a request. It was an imperial decree. Terrence is offering you a lifeline. You embarrassed us all last night at the gala, and this is your chance to make amends. Let a real businessman handle this messy little hobby of yours. I crossed my arms, feeling the immense weight of the $74 million backing my posture. And what if I refuse? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. What if I decide my company is not for sale under any circumstances whatsoever? Beatrice's eyes narrowed into terrifying slits. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious hiss. If you do not sign that contract right now, I will personally call my friends at the state health department. You know exactly who I play tennis with, Nia. I will have them conduct a surprise inspection today. I will have them claim they found hazardous materials. I will shut this toxic lab down permanently, and you will be left with absolutely nothing. You will be a bankrupt failure just like you were always destined to be. I will make sure every elite social circle in Atlanta knows you are a fraud. You will never secure another client, another vendor, or another dollar in this town. My influence stretches further than you can possibly comprehend, and I will use every ounce of it to crush your pathetic little rebellion. DeAndre smirked, clearly enjoying the display of power. Come on, Nia, he urged softly, playing the reasonable mediator. Do not fight your mother on this. Just sign the document. Take the 15 grand. Go quietly. It is the best deal you will ever get in your entire life. I looked at DeAndre, then at Beatrice. I picked up the heavy 30-page contract. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not defend my business or my worth. Instead, I walked over to the heavy-duty industrial shredder I used for sensitive supplier documents. I turned the powerful machine on. The loud, whirring sound filled the room. Maintaining unbroken eye contact with my mother, I fed the thick contract directly into the shredder's steel teeth. The machine chewed through the heavy paper, obliterating Terrence's insulting offer into hundreds of tiny, irrecoverable strips of meaningless garbage. Beatrice gasped, stepping back as if I had physically struck her. Are you insane? She screamed, her perfectly manicured facade cracking completely. You stupid, arrogant girl. You have just ruined your entire life. I will make sure you never sell another product in this city. As her shrill voice echoed off the concrete walls, my cell phone rang loudly. I glanced at the caller ID. It was the estate attorney for Julian Pierce, the man handling my newly acquired empire. I held up a single finger, silencing my mother with a gesture of pure authority that I had never used before. She was so shocked by my audacity that she actually stopped yelling. I answered the phone, putting it on speaker for maximum effect. Good morning, Ms. Pierce. The attorney's deep, resonant voice filled the laboratory. I have completed the urgent financial audit you requested last night regarding Terrence Vaughn's investment firm. DeAndre stiffened at the mention of his boss's name. Beatrice looked confused. I smiled. Please continue, I said smoothly. The attorney's voice was crisp and clinical. Terrence Vaughn's firm is completely insolvent, Ms. Pierce. They have been secretly surviving entirely on high-yield bridge loans from Pierce Holdings. As the new sole owner of Pierce Holdings, you hold the debt. Terrence Vaughn owes you $12 million due immediately. Shall I initiate the asset freeze? The silence in the laboratory was absolutely deafening. DeAndre dropped his expensive leather briefcase, his jaw unhinging in pure, unadulterated shock as the reality of his own imminent financial ruin finally registered in his opportunistic mind. Beatrice stood completely frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of absolute horror and profound disbelief at the shifting power dynamic. Yes, initiate the freeze immediately. I instructed, my voice ringing with absolute power and undeniable authority over the people who had abused me. The pathetic little games are officially over right now. Part 3, then 500 words. The pathetic little games are officially over right now. I did not wait for Beatrice to formulate another threat, or for DeAndre to attempt a frantic apology. I simply grabbed my leather tote bag, locked the main deadbolt behind me, and walked out into the humid Atlanta afternoon. My phone buzzed with frantic texts from Terrence, but I ignored every single one of them. I hailed a private car service and directed the driver to the financial district, watching the skyline shift to towering symbols of extreme wealth. The address the attorney provided belonged to a heavily guarded glass high-rise in the absolute center of Buckhead. As I stepped through the revolving doors, armed security personnel intercepted me. When I gave my name, their entire demeanor shifted from intimidating to deeply deferential. They escorted me to a private elevator requiring retinal clearance. It bypassed every single floor and opened directly into a breathtaking penthouse suite. The estate attorney, Mr. Sterling, was waiting for me behind a massive mahogany desk. He was a distinguished older man with sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He stood up and extended a silver lockbox across the polished wood surface. Inside sat a gold keycard and a titanium encrypted hard drive. Welcome to your empire, Ms. Pierce, he said, his tone carrying a profound level of respect I was entirely unaccustomed to receiving. Julian left very specific instructions for this exact moment. He wanted you to hear the truth from him directly before you made any major financial decisions. Mr. Sterling pressed a button on his desk and the floor-to-ceiling windows tinted to pitch black. A large screen lowered from the ceiling. He handed me a remote control and respectfully stepped out of the room, leaving me completely alone in the cavernous office. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. A man appeared. He had my deep brown skin, my exact eye shape, and the very same determined set of my jaw. Julian Pierce looked straight into the camera. Despite the visible signs of a terminal illness, his posture radiated absolute authority. "Hello, Nia," his deep voice filled the room, sending a powerful shiver straight down my spine. "If you are watching this, I am gone. I have spent my entire life building an empire, but you are the only legacy I actually care about. I know you have spent your life wondering why I abandoned you. The truth is, I never took a single step away from you. Your mother pushed me into a grave I had to dig my way out of using nothing but my bare hands and sheer willpower." Julian leaned forward, resting his hands on his desk. 30 years ago, your mother and I were just two ambitious kids in Atlanta. I was an engineer. I had just invented a groundbreaking supply chain logistics algorithm. It was raw, but it was guaranteed to revolutionize global shipping. Beatrice knew its true value, but she also knew I lacked the elite social capital she craved so desperately. He paused, taking a slow breath. She met Jasmine's father at a country club mixer wearing a dress bought with my hard-earned money. He was a wealthy developer from a legacy family, but his business was failing under hidden liabilities. Beatrice made a demonic deal. She stole my prototype algorithm and handed it to him to save his company and secure her spot in high society. When I discovered the theft and tried to go to the authorities, she orchestrated a ruthless trap. She framed me for corporate embezzlement, using forged documents to make it look like I was stealing from his firm. My heart stopped beating. My mother had not just chased money. She had maliciously destroyed an innocent man to secure her throne. Julian's eyes hardened with a mixture of old pain and lingering fury. I was facing 20 years in federal prison. Beatrice offered me a choice. She would make the fake charges disappear if I signed away my parental rights and vanished. She told me that if I stayed, she would make sure you grew up visiting me behind thick glass. So I left. I changed my name. I moved to the coast and rebuilt my algorithm from scratch. I built Pierce Holdings into a global titan, operating from the shadows, so she would never know I survived her betrayal. Tears spilled down my cheeks as Julian looked directly into the camera lens, his expression softening into pure, heartbreaking love. "You might wonder why she kept you. Jasmine's father did not want another man's child in his perfect house. Beatrice kept you as a punching bag. She kept you because you looked exactly like me. Every time she looked at your beautiful dark skin and your natural hair, she saw the man she betrayed. She punished you for the guilt she refused to feel." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The puzzle was finally complete. The constant emotional abuse, the blatant colorism, the way Beatrice allowed Jasmine to treat me like dirt. It was all a calculated punishment for a crime I never committed. But I never stopped watching you. Nia. Julian continued, a proud smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "I saw you refuse to conform to her shallow world. I saw you start your business. I was the one who sent the $7,000 every month. I had to use anonymous accounts, so Beatrice would not trace the money and steal it from you. It was the only way I could hold your hand while you built your dream without triggering her radar. Now I do not have to hide anymore. I am giving you everything. Do not shrink yourself, Nia. You are a Pierce. Take my empire and make them pay for every single tear you ever shed." The video faded to black. The silence in the penthouse was heavy and absolute. I sat in the leather chair staring at the blank screen as a monumental shift occurred deep within my soul. The air in the room felt charged with endless possibilities. The terrified, eager-to-please daughter died in that room. The desperate entrepreneur begging for validation ceased to exist. I was the heir to a billionaire. My father had bought my freedom, and he had given me the ultimate arsenal to exact my revenge. The monthly deposits had kept me alive, but the $74 million and the ruthless corporate power of Pierce Holdings would allow me to reshape my entire reality. Mr. Sterling quietly re-entered the office. He walked over to the desk and observed my face. He must have seen the drastic change in my posture, because he gave a curt, respectful nod. "Are we ready to proceed, Ms. Pierce?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, my voice completely devoid of any hesitation. "We are going to restructure my family's reality. I want to know exactly what kind of leverage I currently hold over them." Mr. Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick financial dossier bound in red leather. He placed it squarely in front of me. He did not smile, but there was a distinct gleam of professional anticipation in his eyes. "Julian was a highly strategic man," Mr. Sterling said smoothly. "Over the last decade, as Pierce Holdings acquired various financial institutions, he quietly instructed our acquisitions department to buy up the specific debt portfolios belonging to your family members. He never acted on them. He wanted to leave the execution up to you." I opened the red folder. The first page was a comprehensive property deed. The second page was a commercial mortgage agreement. My eyes scanned the incredibly detailed legal jargon until I reached the bottom lines. I felt a sharp, dangerous smile spread across my face. Jasmine operated a supposedly elite luxury real estate brokerage catering exclusively to Atlanta's highest earners. Her brand was built on the illusion of limitless wealth and untouchable prestige. Beatrice lived in a sprawling $6 million mansion in Buckhead that served as her primary weapon of social intimidation. Both women projected an image of absolute financial invincibility, but the documents sitting in front of me told a completely different story. Jasmine's entire commercial brokerage and Beatrice's massive residential estate were heavily mortgaged to the absolute brink of foreclosure, and the lender holding the paper for both properties was a venture firm called Apex Capital. I looked up at Mr. Sterling, tracing the embossed logo on the document with my index finger. "Apex Capital is a subsidiary of Pierce Holdings," I stated. Mr. Sterling nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. You now own Apex Capital in its entirety. Your mother and your sister do not own their homes or their businesses. You own them. They have been missing payments for 3 consecutive months. The previous management granted them leniency to avoid causing a stir in the local market. As the new executive chairwoman, you have the absolute right to demand immediate payment in full or initiate aggressive foreclosure proceedings by tomorrow morning without any further warning." I closed the red folder and rested my hands on top of it. Beatrice had threatened to call the health department to shut down my laboratory. She thought she could take away my livelihood with a single phone call. Jasmine had poured wine on my dress and told me I was only good for scrubbing her messes. They thought I was completely powerless. They had absolutely no clue that I was now their landlord, their bank, and their worst nightmare. Their entire existence rested in my palm. "Draw up the default notices immediately," I instructed Mr. Sterling, feeling the thrill of absolute control coursing through my veins. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my clothes and adjusting the lapels of my jacket. "Do not execute them just yet. I want to wait for the absolutely perfect, undeniable moment to drop the guillotine on them. They need to believe they are still winning. Let them enjoy their fragile, false sense of security for just a few more days. I will let them continue building their pathetic little castles constructed entirely on desperate lies. But the second they try to step on me again, I will pull the rug out from under them completely and permanently. When I finally strike back, I want to watch their entire elite world completely shatter piece by piece right before their very eyes. Their reign of terror is officially finished, and my turn has just begun." The drive back to my apartment from the financial district gave me time to process the monumental shift in my reality. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the architect of their impending ruin. However, I knew the Atlanta rumor mill operated faster than the speed of light. DeAndre had witnessed me execute a $12 million asset freeze with a single phone call. A social climbing opportunist like him would never keep that kind of humiliation to himself. He would have immediately run straight to Terrence, trying to save his own skin by warning his boss. Word that I was seen leaving a billionaire's heavily guarded law firm would have reached my mother before I even unlocked my front door. Sure enough, the ambush was already waiting for me. As I stepped out of the elevator and walked down the narrow hallway toward my modest apartment, I noticed my front door was slightly ajar. The lock had been forced open. A cold wave of adrenaline hit my system, but the fear I would have felt yesterday was completely absent. I pushed the door open to find my mother Beatrice and my sister Jasmine sitting on my velvet sofa as if they owned the place. Standing near the kitchen island was an older man in a sharply tailored charcoal suit holding a leather briefcase. Terrence was conspicuously absent, likely dealing with the catastrophic financial fires I had just ignited at his firm. "Well, look who finally decided to come home," Jasmine sneered, crossing her legs and inspecting her pristine manicure. "We have been waiting here for almost an hour, Nia. You really need to hire a better cleaning service. This place smells like cheap lavender and desperation." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, leaning against the wood. "Breaking and entering is a felony, Jasmine. Even for someone who pretends to be Atlanta royalty." Beatrice stood up, her face instantly twisting into a mask of exaggerated theatrical anguish. She pressed a hand to her chest, playing the role of the devastated, deeply concerned matriarch to absolute perfection. "Naya, sweetheart, please do not use that aggressive tone with us. We are simply here because we love you. We are terrified for your well-being." She gestured dramatically toward the man in the charcoal suit. "This is Dr. Kensington. He is a highly respected psychiatric specialist who works exclusively with elite families in our circle. He operates with the utmost discretion, which is exactly what we need right now to avoid a public scandal." I looked at the man. He offered a tight, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. He was a hired gun, a high-priced fixer, paid to diagnose inconvenient family members with whatever condition justified locking them away and seizing their assets. "A public scandal?" I asked, keeping my voice completely level. "What exactly are you talking about, Beatrice?" Beatrice let out a staged, shuddering sob, pulling a silk handkerchief from her designer bag. "DeAndre called us Nia. He told us what happened in your laboratory this morning. He said you shredded a highly generous $15,000 contract. He said you were hallucinating, shouting crazy delusions about freezing Terrence's corporate accounts and owning massive financial empires. You are having a severe manic episode. You have completely lost your grip on reality, and you are a profound danger to yourself." Jasmine stood up, walking over to join her mother. She pulled a thick stack of legal documents from her designer tote bag and slammed them onto my kitchen counter. "It is pathetic, Nia. You have spent so many years failing at your little lotion mixing hobby that your brain finally snapped under the pressure. You think you are some kind of secret billionaire? We cannot let you destroy yourself or embarrass this family any further." Dr. Kensington stepped forward, adopting a soothing, patronizing tone designed to pacify a hysterical patient. "Nia, your mother and sister are acting out of pure love. Delusions of grandeur and sudden erratic behavior are classic signs of a severe psychological break. Your family simply wants to get you the premium residential care you desperately need. But to do that, we need to secure your administrative affairs, so you do not do anything financially ruinous while you are unwell." Jasmine tapped her manicured finger aggressively against the top page of the document stack. "This is a medical power of attorney and a complete financial conservatorship agreement. Sign it right now. It grants Mother and me total legal control over your business, your bank accounts, and your medical decisions. We will check you into a luxury private facility in upstate New York where you can rest, and we will manage your messy little life until you are cured." The sheer audacity of their plan was actually breathtaking. They were terrified. DeAndre had warned them that I had access to serious capital and high-powered attorneys. They did not know the exact details of Julian Pierce's $74 million trust, but their greedy, parasitic instincts told them I was hiding a fortune. Instead of asking me the truth, they decided to weaponize the mental health system to declare me legally incompetent so they could hijack my accounts and siphon every single dollar for themselves. They wanted to lock me in a psychiatric ward so they could continue funding their lavish fake lifestyles on my dime. Beatrice wiped a fake tear from her cheek. "Please, Nia, just sign the papers. If you fight us on this, Dr. Kensington is fully prepared to sign an involuntary psychiatric hold. The police will come, they will put you in restraints, and the entire city will watch you be dragged out of this building like a rabid animal. You will lose your business anyway. Do the smart thing and surrender gracefully." A year ago, this highly coordinated psychological warfare would have broken me. I would have screamed, cried, and desperately tried to prove my sanity, which is exactly what Dr. Kensington needed to justify his fake diagnosis. I would have played right into their vicious manipulative trap. But today, I was untouchable. I was the executive chairwoman of a multinational empire. I looked at the three of them, observing their desperate, greedy eyes. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a single tear. I simply lifted my left wrist and casually tapped the sleek face of my smartwatch twice. With those two subtle taps, I activated a hidden high-definition security camera embedded in a decorative vase on my bookshelf. The camera instantly began live streaming crystal-clear audio and video of this entire illegal intervention directly to a secure private cloud server actively monitored by my legal team in Buckhead. Everything they were saying, every threat of an involuntary hold, every attempt at extortion, was being recorded as undeniable evidence of criminal conspiracy and attempted fraud. I walked slowly toward the kitchen island, picking up a pen. Jasmine's eyes lit up with victorious greed, assuming I was broken and ready to submit. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice echoing clearly for the hidden microphone to pick up. "You broke into my locked apartment. You brought an unlicensed medical professional to threaten me with involuntary confinement. And you are attempting to extort my signature on a financial conservatorship so you can seize control of my bank accounts and my business. Is that an accurate summary of your plan, Beatrice?" Beatrice frowned, clearly unsettled by my absolute lack of emotional reaction. "It is not extortion, Nia. It is an intervention. We are saving you from your own pathetic delusions. Now stop stalling and sign the damn papers before I lose my patience." I smiled, dropping this pen onto the floor. "I am not signing anything. And Dr. Kensington, if you attempt to file a fraudulent medical hold against a completely sane woman, my legal team will ensure you lose your medical license, face federal extortion charges, and spend the rest of your miserable life defending yourself in civil court. I highly suggest you pack your briefcase and leave my property before the police arrive to arrest you for breaking and entering." Dr. Kensington visibly paled. He looked at Beatrice, realizing he had walked into a highly volatile legal trap instead of a routine wealthy family shakedown. He quickly grabbed his briefcase and hurried toward the door without saying another word. Jasmine screamed in frustration. "You are making a huge mistake, Nia. We are going to destroy you." Before she could launch into another tirade, the front door swung wide open. Terrence burst into the apartment. His custom-tailored suit was completely disheveled, his tie was loosened, and he looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He was breathing heavily, his eyes darting frantically around the room until they locked onto me. Terrence finally, Jasmine sighed in relief, walking toward her husband. "Tell this crazy girl to sign the papers. DeAndre said she was hallucinating about freezing your accounts. We need to lock her up and take her money." Terrence did not look at his wife. He did not look at Beatrice. He stared directly at me, his face devoid of all his usual arrogant bravado. He looked absolutely terrified. I stepped away from the kitchen counter and walked calmly past Jasmine and Beatrice. I stopped right in front of Terrence, looking up into his panic-stricken eyes. I leaned in close, ensuring my voice was low, deadly, and perfectly clear. "You look a little stressed, Terrence," I whispered softly. "You should really check your firm's liquidity right now. I hear your primary backer just froze your assets, and your $12 million bridge loan is officially in default." The blood completely drained from Terrence's face. In the deafening silence of my apartment, Terrence's cell phone suddenly started ringing frantically in his pocket. It was the sound of his entire elite financial world crashing down. The sharp ringing of Terrence's cell phone shattered the heavy silence in my living room. He stared at the screen, his arrogance evaporating, replaced by the sheer terror of a man watching his financial empire disintegrate. He did not answer it. Instead, he shoved past Beatrice and Jasmine, rushing out of my apartment without looking back. Dr. Kensington was already gone, and now their primary source of elite funding had fled the scene in an absolute panic. Beatrice and Jasmine were left standing in my kitchen, their grand intervention completely derailed. They had come to lock me away and steal my assets, but they left with nothing but confusion and mounting dread. Jasmine gathered her fraudulent conservatorship documents, her hands visibly shaking. She glared at me, her eyes burning with a venomous rage that told me this war was far from over. "You think you have won?" Nia, Jasmine hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. You think you can just freeze my husband out and embarrass us? You are nothing but a bitter, jealous failure. I will make sure you lose everything. I will show everyone in Atlanta what a real entrepreneur looks like. Beatrice followed her golden child toward the door, refusing to make eye contact with me. She pulled her designer coat tightly around her shoulders, her pristine image fractured by the reality of my newfound authority. They slammed the heavy wooden door behind them, leaving me alone in the quiet sanctuary of my apartment. I knew Jasmine was not making empty threats. My sister was a creature of intense vanity and vicious retaliation. Stripped of her ability to steal my money through a fake psychiatric hold, she would pivot to the only other weapon she knew how to use. She would try to destroy my reputation and outshine me publicly. 2 weeks later, the retaliatory strike arrived. Word spread through the Atlanta high society network with incredible speed. Jasmine was launching a brand new ultra-luxury skincare line called Aura by Jasmine. The marketing campaign was aggressive and heavily funded, featuring glossy billboards across Buckhead and targeted social media ads, boasting about a revolutionary proprietary botanical formula designed exclusively for melanin-rich skin. When I saw the first promotional video, my blood ran completely cold. Jasmine stood in front of a sleek minimalist backdrop, holding a frosted glass bottle. She recited the exact ingredient list I had spent 5 grueling years perfecting in my laboratory. She pitched the exact molecular balance of cold-pressed rosehip oil, raw shea butter, and specialized lavender absolute that I had meticulously formulated. It was not just a similar product. It was an exact carbon copy replica of my life's work. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. DeAndre. When my opportunistic ex-husband had ambushed me in my laboratory to force that insulting $15,000 buyout contract on me, he had not just come to intimidate me. While Beatrice was screaming at me and creating a massive distraction, DeAndre had quietly slipped his hand onto my workstation. He had stolen my encrypted flash drive containing the master formulas, the exact chemical ratios, and the entire manufacturing blueprint for my brand. Jasmine and Terrence had used DeAndre as a Trojan horse. They had stolen my intellectual property right out from under my nose and fast-tracked a luxury rebrand to completely push me out of the market. They intended to crush my business, steal my legacy, and parade it around Atlanta as Jasmine's brilliant entrepreneurial triumph. The sheer audacity of the betrayal was staggering, but I did not panic. I was no longer a defenseless artisan mixing lotions in a basement. I was the executive chairwoman of Julian Pierce Holdings, and I had infinite resources at my absolute disposal. I picked up my phone and called my estate attorney, Mr. Sterling. I need you to locate the exact manufacturing facility Jasmine Vaughn has contracted to produce her new skincare line. I instructed him, my voice devoid of any emotion. I want to know who is mixing her products, who is bottling them, and who owns the factory floor. Mr. Sterling operated with ruthless efficiency. Within 48 hours, he presented me with a comprehensive dossier. Jasmine had contracted a highly specialized mid-sized cosmetic manufacturing plant located just outside the city limits. It was the only facility in the region equipped to handle the specific cold-press emulsification process required for my stolen formula. Because she was rushing the launch to destroy me, she had signed an exclusive ironclad production contract with this specific plant, sinking millions of borrowed dollars into the initial inventory run. Excellent, I told Mr. Sterling, studying the factory's financial profile. Buy the facility. I do not care what the asking price is. Pay double if you have to. I want total undisputed ownership of that entire manufacturing plant by the end of the week, and I want my name buried behind a maze of corporate LLCs, so Jasmine has absolutely no idea who actually owns her supply chain. Consider it done, Ms. Pierce, he replied. The grand launch party for Aura by Jasmine was held the following weekend at an opulent rooftop venue overlooking the city skyline. It was the social event of the season, packed with influencers, local politicians, and wealthy investors. The venue was decorated in white and gold, with towering floral arrangements and crystal displays, showcasing the stolen skincare products. Beatrice had personally ensured an invitation was sent to my apartment. It was not a gesture of family inclusion. It was a mandatory summons to my own public execution. She wanted me there to witness my sister's ultimate triumph and my complete professional humiliation. I arrived at the venue wearing a stunning custom-tailored emerald green power suit. I did not look like a defeated victim. I looked like a woman who owned the building. As I stepped off the private elevator onto the rooftop, the flashing lights of hired photographers illuminated the space. Beatrice spotted me immediately and glided over holding a glass of vintage champagne. She looked me up and down, a venomous smile plastered across her face. "Well, I am genuinely surprised you had the nerve to show up tonight, Nia," she said, her voice dripping with extreme condescension. "But I am glad you are here. I want you to take a very good look around this room. See? This is what a real entrepreneur looks like. Jasmine took your messy amateur little idea and made it elite. She elevated it to a level you could never possibly achieve. Learn your place, Nia. You will always be at the bottom of this family." I smiled warmly at my mother, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. "It is a beautiful party, Beatrice. Jasmine really knows how to put on a show. It is almost a shame she does not actually own the stage she is standing on." Beatrice rolled her eyes, scoffing loudly. "Still clinging to your pathetic delusions of grandeur, I see. You are so bitter it is actually sad to watch. Enjoy the free drinks, Nia. It is the closest you will ever get to actual luxury." She turned on her designer heel and walked back toward the main stage, where Jasmine was preparing to give her keynote address. DeAndre was standing near the front row, looking incredibly smug in a velvet tuxedo jacket. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a mocking toast, silently celebrating his successful theft of my flash drive. Terrence stood beside him, trying to look confident, though the heavy bags under his eyes betrayed the immense stress of his collapsing investment firm. Jasmine tapped the microphone, the feedback echoing across the crowded rooftop. The affluent guests quieted down, turning their attention to the golden child of Atlanta society. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight." Jasmine began, her voice dripping with practiced fake humility. "Aura by Jasmine is more than just a brand to me. It is a deeply personal journey. I spent years in the laboratory dedicating my heart and soul to perfecting a formula that truly honors melanin-rich skin. I wanted to create a legacy of empowerment, a product that proves Black excellence is undeniably luxurious." The crowd erupted into enthusiastic applause. Beatrice clapped the loudest, beaming with overwhelming pride for the daughter who had just brazenly stolen my life's work. "We have officially secured nationwide distribution." Jasmine continued, her face glowing under the bright stage lights. "In exactly 5 days, our premier line will hit the shelves of every major luxury department store in the country. Our manufacturing partners are working around the clock, producing thousands of units as we speak. This is just the beginning of a massive empire." The audience cheered again. I stood quietly near the back of the room, listening to the thunderous applause. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I watched my sister bask in the stolen glory, accepting the adoration of a crowd she had completely deceived. They thought she was a brilliant innovator. They had no idea she was nothing but a desperate thief dancing on a borrowed stage. I pulled my cell phone from my emerald blazer pocket. I opened my encrypted messaging application and selected the secure chat with Mr. Sterling. The buyout of the cosmetic manufacturing plant had been finalized and legally recorded 3 hours ago. The ink on the contracts was completely dry. I now held absolute undisputed control over the facility, the machines, the labor force, and every single product rolling off the assembly line. I typed a short, highly precise message to my attorney. "Execute the manufacturer buyout. Halt all production immediately. Seize the inventory." I hit send, locking my phone and slipping it back into my pocket. I looked up at the stage just as Jasmine raised her glass to toast her fake success. She caught my eye across the crowded room, flashing me a look of pure malicious triumph. I smiled back at her, raising my glass in return. She thought she had won the war by stealing my formula. She had absolutely no idea that I just legally purchased the sole manufacturing plant she contracted to produce her stolen goods. I effectively owned her entire supply chain, and I was about to choke the life out of her fake empire before a single bottle ever reached a store shelf. The party raged on around me, filled with the clinking of glasses and the hollow laughter of people celebrating a mirage. I moved through the crowd with quiet purpose, feeling the intoxicating weight of true power. Every compliment paid to Jasmine was a down payment on her impending humiliation. I watched Beatrice parrot around the room, boasting to her socialite friends about her brilliant eldest daughter, completely oblivious to the financial earthquake rumbling just beneath her designer shoes. The trap was flawlessly set. The steel jaws were already snapping shut. Tomorrow morning, when Jasmine arrived at the factory to oversee the final shipping logistics, she would find the gates locked, the machines powered down, and a team of my corporate lawyers waiting for her in the administrative office. She would learn that the millions of dollars she borrowed to fund this stolen venture were entirely lost. She would face catastrophic breach of contract lawsuits from every major department store she had promised inventory to. The realization of her impending doom made the sparkling water taste sweeter than any vintage champagne Beatrice could ever afford. I did not need to scream or cry or throw a tantrum to make them pay for what they did. I just needed to let them overextend themselves, fueled by their own arrogant greed, until they stepped directly into the snare I had meticulously crafted. I walked over to the edge of the rooftop terrace, looking out over the glittering lights of the Atlanta skyline. This city had always felt like a cage built by my mother's oppressive expectations, a place where I was constantly judged for the shade of my skin and the texture of my hair. But tonight, the city looked entirely different. It looked like a vast, conquerable territory. I took a deep, refreshing breath of the cool night air. The empire Julian Pierce had built for me was vast, but the one I was about to build on the ruins of my family's deceit would be utterly legendary. I turned my back on the party, walked to the private elevator, and descended into the night, ready to watch them all burn. The morning after Jasmine's glamorous launch party, the scent of impending ruin hung heavy over the Atlanta elite. While my sister was waking up to the nightmare of a locked manufacturing plant, her husband Terrence was fighting a completely different kind of war. My estate attorney, Mr. Sterling, called me just after 8 o'clock. His tone was as crisp and clinical as always. "Good morning, Miss Pierce. The financial vice you placed around Terrence Vaughn's investment firm has officially crushed his liquidity. He is completely drowning." I stood by the windows of my apartment, sipping black coffee. "Explain everything, please." With his credit lines entirely frozen by Pierce Holdings, Terrence could no longer hide the massive gaps in his accounting. Federal regulators had already scheduled a surprise audit of his firm for the end of the week. He was desperate. In a blind panic to cover the missing client funds before the auditors arrived, Terrence had just made a fatal, highly illegal move. According to Mr. Sterling's relentless financial surveillance, Terrence had secured a high-interest offshore bridge loan from a shadowy syndicate in the Cayman Islands. He needed immediate cash to maintain his pristine, fake society image right now. To secure this highly illegal cash injection, Terrence needed massive collateral. He did not have any of his own. So he forged Jasmine's signature on a power of attorney document and secretly pledged Beatrice's $6 million Buckhead mansion as the sole guarantee for the loan. He had literally bet his mother-in-law's roof on a desperate gamble to save his own skin without either woman having the slightest clue. Let the offshore funds clear into his account. I instructed my attorney, feeling a cold smile form on my lips. Let him think he has temporarily survived today safely. The federal audit will uncover the offshore origin of the money anyway, which will only add money laundering to his impending list of felony charges. I had barely hung up the phone when a sharp knock echoed from my front door. I checked the security monitor. Standing in the hallway was my opportunistic ex-husband, DeAndre. He was holding a massive, expensive bouquet of white lilies, my favorite flowers. The sheer audacity of this man was almost impressive. DeAndre had put the pieces together. He had seen my absolute authority during the failed intervention. He witnessed everything unfold so quickly. He had witnessed Terrence's total financial collapse. DeAndre was a parasite who only attached himself to the wealthiest host, and his survival instincts told him that I was now the biggest apex predator in the city. He was here to jump ship before Terrence dragged him down to the bottom of the ocean. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, leaning casually against the doorframe. I did not invite him inside. "Nia, you look absolutely breathtaking," DeAndre said, flashing his perfectly bright practice smile. He thrust the lilies toward me. "I brought these for you as a gift today. I have been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I realized I made the biggest mistake of my entire life when I walked away from our marriage." I looked at the flowers, then up at his desperate eyes. I kept my expression carefully neutral. "Is that right? DeAndre, you realized this suddenly, right after you watched me freeze your boss's assets?" He let out a heavy theatrical sigh, attempting to look deeply remorseful. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a smooth, intimate whisper. "I was blinded by the corporate world, Nia. Terrence manipulated my entire professional career constantly. He used my ambition against me. I always loved you. I never stopped loving you. I only took that vice president job because I wanted to prove I could provide for us." I opened the door a fraction wider, silently gesturing for him to enter. If I was going to nail him to the wall, I needed his full confession on my territory. I walked toward the kitchen island, turning my back to him, just long enough to activate the hidden microphone embedded in my smartwatch. "You expect me to believe you always loved me?" I asked, pouring cold water. I slid one glass across the marble counter toward him. "What about the flash drive, DeAndre? You came into my laboratory and stole my proprietary skincare formulas. You handed my life's work directly to Jasmine so she could launch her fake luxury brand." DeAndre took an eager sip of the water, looking relieved that I was engaging with him instead of throwing him out. He leaned against the counter, shaking his head with an expression of intense, fabricated guilt. "I did not want to do it, Nia. I swear to you. Terrence forced me to take the drive last week. He told me that if I did not grab that drive while Beatrice distracted you, he would fire me and blackball me from every investment firm in Atlanta. Jasmine was desperate for a product line, and Terrence was desperate for the cash flow her launch would bring. They made me do it." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the marble counter. I adopted a soft, sympathetic tone, playing the role of the understanding, forgiving woman he desperately hoped I still was. "Terrence must be under a massive amount of pressure to force you into corporate espionage and blatant theft. Is his firm really in that much trouble?" DeAndre scoffed, emboldened by my apparent sympathy. He took the bait completely. "Trouble does not even begin to describe it. Terrence is running a massive Ponzi scheme. He has been embezzling millions from his elite clients for the past 2 years to fund his and Jasmine's lavish lifestyle. The cars, the vacations, the designer clothes. It was all bought with stolen client money." I widened my eyes, acting appropriately shocked. "Embezzling. But how is he covering the gaps in the accounts? The feds are supposed to audit his firm on Friday morning." DeAndre laughed, a cruel, arrogant sound. "He thinks he is a genius, but he is actually an idiot. He just secured an illegal offshore loan this morning to temporarily replace the missing millions before the auditors arrive. He forged Jasmine's signature and put your mother's mansion up as collateral. If he defaults, Beatrice will literally be thrown out onto the street. He is a criminal, Nia. But I can help you take him down. Take me back. We can rebuild our life together. With your new money and my corporate knowledge, we would be completely unstoppable in Atlanta society forever." I stood up straight, dropping the sympathetic facade entirely. The soft, understanding look in my eyes vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated ice. I reached over to my smartwatch and tapped the screen, stopping the hidden recording. "I do not need your corporate knowledge, DeAndre," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "And I certainly do not need a spineless thief who steals from his own wife to impress a con artist." DeAndre's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted around the kitchen as the sudden shift in my demeanor registered in his opportunistic, highly cowardly brain. "Nia, wait. I am on your side. I just gave you everything you need to destroy them." "You did," I agreed, picking up the bouquet of white lilies he had brought me. I walked over to the trash can and unceremoniously dropped the expensive flowers directly into the garbage. But you did not give it to me out of loyalty. You gave it to me because you are a coward trying to dodge a federal indictment. I walked back to the kitchen island and picked up my phone, waving it in front of his arrogant, completely panicked face right now. I just recorded every single word you said, DeAndre. You just confessed to participating in corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. You also just provided detailed first-hand testimony of Terrence Vaughn's federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and offshore money laundering. The remaining color drained completely from DeAndre's face. He stumbled backward, bumping into one of the velvet bar stools. You recorded me. You cannot use that. That is inadmissible. I smiled, feeling a dark, satisfying thrill coursing through my veins. It is perfectly admissible in Georgia, DeAndre. But more importantly, the FBI definitely loves a good desperate whistleblower right this minute. When they receive an anonymous tip with enough specific financial details to secure a search warrant, they act fast. Please, Nia, he begged, his voice cracking with sudden, overwhelming panic. He held his hands up in a gesture of absolute surrender. Do not do this. They will send me to federal prison. I am begging you. I walked past him, opening my front door wide. I stared him down with absolute authority. You have two choices: run or go to jail today. He scrambled out the door. Now it was time to watch my arrogant sister lose absolutely everything tomorrow. The next morning dawned with the kind of crisp, clear Atlanta sky that usually promised a perfect day. For my sister Jasmine, it was supposed to be the most important week of her entire life. Her stolen luxury skincare line Aura by Jasmine was officially scheduled to ship to over 200 high-end department stores nationwide in just 3 days. Her aggressive marketing campaign had completely saturated the city. Billboards plastered her flawless, heavily edited face across the major highways. She had leveraged every single ounce of her false social capital to secure massive pre-orders, promising her elite retail partners an exclusive, highly lucrative product launch. She was flying high on a stolen set of wings, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just purchased the entire sky. I woke up early, bypassing my usual morning laboratory routine. Today required a completely different kind of armor. I dressed in a tailored razor-sharp crimson power suit and stepped into a pair of black designer stilettos. I needed to look like the apex corporate predator I had officially become. My private car service drove me straight to the industrial outskirts of the city, pulling up to the massive, sprawling manufacturing facility I had covertly purchased just a few days prior. This plant was the only facility in the region capable of producing the complex, cold-pressed botanical emulsions my stolen formula required. Jasmine had stupidly locked herself into a highly restrictive, exclusive production contract with this exact factory, assuming her supply chain was totally secure. I walked through the heavy double doors of the administrative building and was immediately greeted by the plant manager, a stern, highly experienced man named Gregory. He had been fully briefed by my legal team regarding the sudden change in corporate ownership and the immediate drastic shift in our production schedule. Good morning, Miss Pierce, Gregory said, handing me a freshly printed clipboard containing the daily operational logs. The factory floor is currently silent. As per your direct executive orders, we halted the entire production line for the Aura brand at exactly midnight. We have also permanently frozen all outbound shipping logistics. The completed pallets are just sitting in the warehouse bay going absolutely nowhere. Excellent work, Gregory, I replied, carefully scanning the highly detailed logs. Have we received any frantic communication from the client yet? He offered a tight, knowing smile. Her logistics coordinator started calling at 6 this morning when the delivery trucks were turned away at the main security gate. I instructed my staff to forward all of her subsequent calls directly to my voicemail. I expect she will be arriving here in person very shortly. I checked my watch. Jasmine was notoriously impatient. When things did not go her way, her fragile, entitled temperament instantly shattered. I knew she would not send an assistant to handle a crisis of this massive magnitude. She would come down here herself to scream at the working-class employees she believed were infinitely beneath her. Clear the main factory floor. I instructed Gregory, walking toward the elevated glass-enclosed management office that overlooked the massive production lines. I want every single worker out of the immediate vicinity. When she gets here, let her through the main security gate. Bring her directly to the production floor. I want to handle this particular customer service complaint personally. I stepped into the glass office, leaving the heavy door cracked open just enough to hear the echoes of the massive, silent factory. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and waited patiently. I did not have to wait long. Less than 40 minutes later, the heavy metal doors of the loading bay slammed open with tremendous, violent force. The sharp, aggressive clicking of designer heels echoed sharply across the polished concrete floor. Jasmine marched into the facility like a deeply enraged dictator whose peasants had just staged an unauthorized rebellion. She was wearing a pristine white designer dress, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She was gripping her expensive leather handbag so tightly, her knuckles were completely white. "Where is the plant manager?" Jasmine screamed, her shrill voice bouncing off the high steel rafters. "I demand to speak to the person in charge of this facility, right this second." "Who authorized a total production freeze on my merchandise?" Gregory stepped out from the shadow of a massive mixing vat, his expression completely neutral and profoundly professional. "Good morning, ma'am. I am the plant manager. How can I help you today?" Jasmine marched right up to him, invading his personal space with absolute towering arrogance. She jabbed a manicured finger directly at his chest. "You can help me by turning these damn machines back on immediately," she shrieked loudly. "My shipping trucks have been sitting outside your gate for 3 hours. I have a nationwide retail launch in exactly 3 days. Do you have any idea who I am? I am Atlanta royalty. My husband handles accounts worth more than this entire pathetic building. If you do not load my products onto those trucks right now, I will personally see to it that you lose your job and this entire facility is sued into absolute bankruptcy." Gregory did not flinch. He did not apologize. He simply looked at the enraged socialite and slowly shook his head. "I am afraid I cannot do that, Mrs. Vaughn. I no longer have the administrative authority to release that specific inventory or operate those particular machines. We are under strict new executive directives." Jasmine let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "New directives? From who I signed an ironclad contract with the owner of this facility. I demand you get them on the phone right now. I will buy this miserable factory if I have to. Turn the machines back on." Gregory took a deliberate step back and gestured gracefully toward the elevated glass office, where I was currently standing. "They cannot do that, Jasmine," my voice rang out, amplified by the sharp, perfect acoustics of the silent industrial floor. Jasmine froze instantly. The vicious, entitled snarl melted entirely off her face, replaced by a look of profound, staggering confusion. She slowly turned her head toward the sound of my voice. I walked out of the glass office, stepping onto the metal staircase, overlooking the production floor. I slowly descended the stairs in my crimson power suit, my heels striking the metal grating with a slow, deliberate, predatory rhythm. I walked right up to my sister, stopping just a few feet away from her trembling, suddenly terrified frame. "They cannot turn the machines back on, Jasmine." I repeated, my voice dropping to a smooth, lethal, and devastatingly calm register. "Because I own this facility now. And I absolutely do not manufacture stolen goods." Jasmine stared at me, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The pristine, untouchable reality she thought she lived in was actively collapsing around her in real time. She looked from me to Gregory and back to me again, her brain violently rejecting the information it was receiving. "You," she finally stammered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "You bought this factory. That is impossible. You are broke, Nia. You are a struggling, pathetic failure. You do not have the capital to buy a commercial manufacturing plant." I smiled, feeling the immense, intoxicating weight of my father's $74 million empire radiating through my veins. "You have always chronically underestimated me, Jasmine. That was your first massive mistake. Your second mistake was assuming I would just roll over and cry when you and DeAndre colluded to steal my proprietary formulas. You actually thought you could break into my laboratory, steal my life's work, slap your cheap plastic name on it, and parade it around Atlanta without any severe consequences. Jasmine took a staggering step back, her chest heaving with panicked, shallow breaths. You are lying, she screamed, desperation clawing at the edges of her breaking sanity. I am going to sue you. I am going to take you to court and destroy you, Nia. I have signed retail contracts. I have wealthy investors. You cannot legally hold my products hostage like this. I will ruin your entire life. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached into the inner pocket of my tailored blazer and pulled out a thick, legally binding document folded neatly in thirds. I stepped forward and pressed the heavy paper firmly against the chest of her expensive white dress, forcing her to instinctively grab it before it fell. That is a formal cease and desist order, I stated with absolute surgical precision. It is accompanied by a civil lawsuit filed in federal court this morning for $20 million in damages due to blatant intellectual property theft, corporate espionage, and trademark infringement. The products sitting in those warehouse bays were manufactured using stolen, patented formulas that belong exclusively to Julian Pierce Holdings. As the executive chairwoman of that corporation, I have officially impounded every single contaminated unit you attempted to produce. Jasmine stared at the heavy legal documents in her shaking hands, the color completely draining from her beautifully made-up face. $20 million, she whispered, her voice cracking under the immense pressure. You cannot do this to me. I have already spent the entire bridge loan. I have absolutely nothing left to pay you. I took a slow, menacing step closer, invading her space, just as she had done to the plant manager minutes ago. That sounds like a terrible personal problem, Jasmine. Maybe you should ask your wealthy husband to bail you out. Oh wait, I almost forgot. Terrence is currently dealing with a massive federal audit because I intentionally froze his entire liquidity network yesterday. You are completely out of money, you are completely out of time, and you are completely out of stolen ideas. As the devastating truth of my words finally shattered her arrogant ego, Jasmine let out a guttural, hysterical sob. She dropped the thick legal documents onto the cold concrete floor, running her trembling hands through her perfectly styled hair, ruining it completely. She was violently unraveling right in front of me, stripped of her elite status, her fake business, and her stolen pride. Then, as if the universe itself was demanding ultimate poetic justice, her cell phone began ringing loudly from inside her designer handbag. Jasmine scrambled to pull the phone out, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped the expensive device on the floor. She stared at the caller ID, her eyes widening in absolute paralyzing panic. It is my bank, she whispered, sounding exactly like a terrified lost child. I smiled, crossing my arms over my crimson blazer. You should probably answer that, Jasmine. I hear they are incredibly aggressive when notifying elite clients that their primary checking accounts are vastly overdrawn and their luxury credit lines have been officially terminated. Jasmine stared at the ringing phone, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming magnitude of her destruction. Jasmine stared at the ringing phone, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming magnitude of her destruction. The screen flashed the name of her private wealth manager. She did not answer. She let it ring until it went to voicemail, her hands shaking violently. Her perfect stolen empire was dead before it even took its first breath. The millions of dollars she had borrowed were gone. The retail contracts were voided. The inventory was locked away in my warehouse. She dropped the phone onto the concrete floor and stumbled out of the manufacturing plant, gasping for air as her reality fractured into a million jagged pieces. She drove frantically to Terrence's office in Buckhead, desperate for her husband to fix the catastrophe. But when she arrived, she found a scene of equal devastation. Terrence was pacing his corner office like a caged animal. Beatrice was sitting on the leather sofa clutching her designer handbag, demanding to know why her premium credit cards were suddenly declining at the country club. Terrence was sweating through his bespoke suit, completely ignoring his mother-in-law. His investment firm was in total freefall. The massive asset freeze I initiated had triggered an automatic lockdown of all his operational accounts. He could not move a single dollar. He could not pay his staff. He could not cover the massive gaps in his client portfolios. We have to go to the source, Terrence suddenly shouted, slamming his fist onto his glass desk. The new CEO of Pierce Holdings is behind this entire asset freeze. They bought out my debt and locked my accounts without a single warning. I am an elite Atlanta investment banker. They cannot treat me like some amateur day trader. We are going to their corporate headquarters right now. I demand a face-to-face meeting with this anonymous executive. Beatrice, you are coming with us. You know every major player in this city. You will use your social leverage to force them to unfreeze my money immediately. Beatrice stood up instantly, her arrogant composure returning. Of course I will, she said smoothly. No one disrespects our family name in this city. I will personally ensure this rogue CEO understands exactly who they are dealing with. We will have your accounts restored by lunch, Terrence. Jasmine nodded silently, too terrified to admit that her own business had just been seized by the same invisible force. The three of them piled into Terrence's luxury sport utility vehicle and drove straight to the towering glass skyscraper that housed the global headquarters of Julian Pierce Holdings. They marched through the grand lobby with the aggressive, entitled energy of people who believed the entire world existed simply to serve them. Terrence bypassed the reception desk entirely, leading his wife and mother-in-law straight to the executive elevators. When they reached the penthouse level, the atmosphere shifted. The top floor was a fortress of silent, intimidating wealth. Polished marble floors stretched out toward a massive set of double mahogany doors. A team of highly professional executive assistants sat at sleek desks guarding the entrance to the main boardroom. Terrence marched right up to the lead assistant, slamming his palm onto her desk. I am Terrence Vaughn, managing partner at Vaughn Capital. I demand to see your CEO immediately. You froze my corporate assets this morning, and I am here to resolve this egregious administrative error right this second. Open those doors. The assistant did not flinch. She looked at Terrence with total professional detachment. Do you have an appointment, Mr. Vaughn? I do not need an appointment. Terrence bellowed, his face turning an angry shade of red. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my mother-in-law is? This is Beatrice, one of the most powerful socialites in Atlanta. You will open those doors right now, or I will ensure you are looking for a new job by the end of the day. Beatrice stepped forward, adjusting her diamond necklace. Listen to my son-in-law, young woman. We are not accustomed to waiting. Inform your employer that Atlanta royalty is here to speak with them. The assistant simply picked up her desk phone, pressed a single button, and spoke quietly. The Vaughn party is here. She listened for a moment, hung up, and gestured toward the heavy mahogany doors. You may enter. The executive chairwoman is expecting you. Terrence smirked, adjusting his tie and shooting a triumphant look at Beatrice and Jasmine. See, he boasted quietly. You just have to show these corporate suits that you are not afraid of them. Let us go secure our money and put them back in their proper place. He pushed the heavy mahogany doors open, leading the two women into the most intimidating boardroom in the entire city. The room was massive, featuring a long, custom-built conference table made of rare black walnut. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, dizzying view of the entire Atlanta skyline. At the far end of the long table sat a massive, high-backed leather executive chair. The chair was turned completely away from them, facing the expansive windows. Terrence cleared his throat loudly, adopting his most aggressive, commanding posture. I do not care what kind of power trip you are on, he announced to the back of the chair. You illegally froze my operational liquidity, and I am here to demand an immediate reversal. You are dealing with elite financial players, not some amateur startup. The room was completely silent for a long, heavy moment. Then the leather chair slowly began to spin around. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting calmly on the black walnut table. I was wearing the same tailored crimson power suit I wore when I destroyed Jasmine at the manufacturing plant earlier that morning. My expression was colder than ice. The reaction was absolute, breathtaking chaos. Beatrice gasped violently, her hand flying up to clutch the heavy pearls around her neck. She staggered backward, bumping into the heavy wooden door frame. Her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated shock. Jasmine let out a strangled whimper, covering her mouth with both hands as the horrifying reality of the morning finally clicked into place. Terrence froze completely. He blinked rapidly, his brain violently rejecting the image in front of him. He let out a harsh, incredibly nervous laugh. What kind of sick joke is this? He demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Nia, what are you doing here? Get out of that chair right now. You are going to get us all arrested for trespassing. Where is the actual CEO? I did not smile. I did not blink. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. I placed my hand flat on the top page and slid the heavy stack forcefully across the smooth mahogany table. The documents glided across the polished wood, stopping directly in front of Terrence's trembling hands. I am the actual CEO, Terrence, I said, my voice echoing with devastating authority. You are looking at the sole executive chairwoman and 100% owner of Julian Pierce Holdings. Terrence looked down at the documents. The top page was the official $74 million trust certification. The second page was the complete corporate ownership transfer signed, sealed, and verified by federal regulators. My name, Nia Pierce, was printed in bold black ink across every single page. That is impossible, Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling with absolute terror. Julian died 30 years ago. He died a broke, miserable criminal. I did not die. Beatrice, I replied, my gaze locking onto my mother like a laser. He survived your vicious trap. He rebuilt his life from absolutely nothing. He built this towering empire while you were busy playing dress-up at the country club. And then he left every single cent of his massive fortune to the daughter you spent 32 years treating like absolute garbage. I own this building. I own Apex Capital. And as of yesterday morning, I officially own all of you. Terrence shook his head frantically, backing away from the table. No, this cannot be happening. You are just a lotion mixer. You are a failure. You do not have the clearance to freeze my investment accounts. I did freeze them, Terrence. Because your investment accounts are entirely funded by my subsidiaries, I stated coldly. And I also know exactly why you were so desperate to secure that illegal offshore bridge loan this morning. You are embezzling millions from your elite clients, and you are terrified of the federal audit scheduled for this Friday. Jasmine snapped her head toward her husband. Embezzling. What is she talking about, Terrence? What bridge loan? Terrence opened his mouth to lie, but I did not give him the chance. I reached across the desk and firmly pressed a small silver button on my console. The lights in the boardroom dimmed instantly. A high-definition projector descended from the ceiling, casting a massive glowing image onto the blank white wall behind me. The document displayed on the screen was a highly illegal offshore financial contract from a shadowy syndicate in the Cayman Islands. I want you to look very closely at the screen. Beatrice, I instructed, my voice ringing with lethal precision. Look at the collateral your perfect elite son-in-law used to secure his desperate high-interest loan to cover his massive felony crimes. Beatrice stepped forward, her eyes squinting in the dim light. She read the bold text on the massive screen. It was the deed to her $6 million Buckhead mansion. She looked down at the bottom of the document. The signature authorizing the collateral pledge belonged to Jasmine. Jasmine gasped. I never signed that. I have never seen that document in my entire life. I know you didn't, Jasmine, I said smoothly, because Terrence forged your signature to steal your mother's house. He bet the roof over Beatrice's head to save himself from a federal prison sentence. Beatrice turned slowly to face Terrence. The immaculate, composed socialite was entirely gone, replaced by a woman staring directly into the abyss of her own absolute destruction. Her face contorted in pure, unbridled horror as she realized the golden boy she had worshipped for years had just signed away everything she owned to cover his massive criminal enterprise. You stole my house! Beatrice whispered, her voice vibrating with a terrifying primal rage. You forged my daughter's signature and you stole my house. Terrence scrambled backward, tripping over the heavy legs of a leather boardroom chair. He raised his hands in a pathetic, cowardly gesture of surrender. Beatrice, I can explain everything. It was just a temporary measure. A bridge loan to cover a minor liquidity issue. I was going to pay it back before you ever found out. Jasmine let out a blood-curdling scream, lunging at her husband with her manicured claws completely extended and ready to strike. You bankrupt, lying piece of garbage! Jasmine shrieked at the top of her lungs. You absolutely ruined us. The pristine illusion of Atlanta royalty instantly dissolved into a pathetic, violent brawl right in the middle of my penthouse boardroom. I sat perfectly still in my executive chair, watching the chaotic destruction unfold with deep, satisfying calmness. I pressed the silver intercom button on my massive mahogany desk. Security, I said smoothly. Please escort these 3 trespassers out of my building immediately. If they resist your instructions, you have my full authorization to contact local law enforcement and press formal charges. 6 heavily armed security guards marched into the room. They grabbed Terrence by his expensive suit jacket, dragging him toward the sleek glass elevators. Jasmine kicked and screamed, hurling vicious insults at me as they pulled her away. Beatrice refused to walk. She dug her designer heels into the plush carpet, her eyes blazing with unprecedented fury. You will deeply regret this, Nia, she spat, fighting against the firm grip of the security team. I will destroy your reputation in this city. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of ungrateful, malicious monster you truly are right now. I offered her a cold, empty smile as the heavy mahogany doors finally slammed shut, cutting off her unhinged threats. But Beatrice was not making empty promises. Stripped of their financial power, their stolen properties, and their elite status, my family went absolutely nuclear. They had no money left, but Beatrice still maintained a massive network of influential social connections across Atlanta. Driven by pure vindictive desperation, Beatrice and Jasmine immediately launched a highly coordinated, incredibly vicious media smear campaign designed to completely annihilate my public image and ruin the organic skincare brand I had built from the ground up. Less than 48 hours after their humiliating eviction from Pierce Holdings, Beatrice secured an exclusive primetime interview on the most prominent Atlanta gossip blog and a major local news station. She wore a modest conservative dress, stripping away her usual flashy diamonds to play the role of the devastated, victimized matriarch. Sitting closely beside a weeping Jasmine, Beatrice stared directly into the television cameras. My daughter Nia has completely lost her mind, Beatrice cried, wiping away perfectly timed manufactured tears. She manipulated a dying, vulnerable old man to steal his entire fortune through absolute deception and trickery. She took his money, Beatrice continued, her voice trembling with fake practiced sorrow. And now she is trying to maliciously evict her own mother onto the cold streets. She froze my innocent son-in-law's business accounts out of pure bitter jealousy because her sister has a beautiful, happy marriage. She is a danger to our community. The news anchor ate up every single word, framing the segment as a tragic story of elder abuse and extreme corporate greed. The broadcast immediately went viral across every major social media platform, sparking massive outrage among the tight-knit Atlanta elite circles. But the smear campaign did not stop with Beatrice and Jasmine. DeAndre, realizing his own corporate career was in serious jeopardy due to his association with Terrence's failing firm, decided to join the relentless attack. He leveraged his fraternity connections to secure a guest spot on a highly popular, controversial Atlanta business podcast. The hosts were notorious for tearing down successful Black women, and DeAndre delivered exactly the kind of toxic, misogynistic narrative they craved. Sitting behind a professional studio microphone, my opportunistic ex-husband painted himself as a completely innocent victim of my supposedly unstable, incredibly toxic, erratic behavior. Nia is a complete fraud and a bitter ex, DeAndre announced to hundreds of thousands of active listeners. I supported her struggling little business for years, pouring my own money into her laboratory. As soon as she scammed her way into a billionaire's trust fund, she completely turned her back on the people who actually built her. She stole my proprietary business strategies and claimed them as her own. She is ruthless, she is unhinged, and she will step on absolutely anyone to get ahead. Do not buy her products. You are funding a deeply malicious, unstable corporate criminal operation. The coordinated media assault was devastatingly effective. Within a matter of hours, the devastating public backlash hit my organic skincare brand like a massive, unstoppable freight train. Angry consumers flooded my company's social media pages with thousands of hateful comments calling me a traitor and a scam artist. A hashtag demanding a total boycott of my products began trending nationwide. Influencers who had previously championed my brand posted lengthy, dramatic videos throwing my serums into the trash. The carefully cultivated, pristine reputation I had spent 5 exhausting years building was completely burning to the ground in front of my eyes. The financial impact was immediate and brutal. Two major retail distributors paused our upcoming seasonal contracts, citing the ongoing public relations nightmare. My boutique venture capital investors, the ones who backed my company long before I inherited Julian Pierce's $74 million empire, started calling my office in a state of absolute sheer panic. They demanded immediate reassurance and a clear strategy to stop the intense bleeding. My corporate public relations team rushed into my executive office, dropping a massive stack of crisis management protocols directly onto my desk. Their faces were pale with extreme stress and professional fear. Ms. Pierce, the head of my public relations department, pleaded, her voice tight with anxiety. "We are losing control of the narrative at an unprecedented speed. The boycott is severely damaging our core demographics' trust. We strongly advise you to issue an immediate comprehensive public apology. We need to draft a press release stating that you are seeking private family mediation and that you deeply regret the current hostility. We need to frame this as a private familial misunderstanding, not a corporate takeover. You have to play the role of the forgiving, humble daughter right now to save the brand." She pointed to a drafted statement on top of the pile. "Just sign this apology, release a short video expressing remorse for the eviction notices, and we can slowly begin rebuilding customer loyalty. If you stay completely silent, Beatrice and DeAndre will absolutely control the entire story. You have to show the public some vulnerability, Nia. Please let us issue the apology before the evening news cycle picks up DeAndre's podcast interview and amplifies it further." I looked at the panicked public relations executive, then down at the meticulously crafted, incredibly pathetic apology letter sitting on my massive executive desk. I picked up the apology letter and calmly ripped it into two equal pieces. "I am not apologizing for taking out the trash," I stated, my voice radiating absolute uncompromising authority. "I will not cower. I will not play the humble broken victim to appease people who built their entire lives on stolen money and vicious lies." My public relations director gasped, looking at the torn paper in total disbelief. "But Ms. Pierce, the boycott will bankrupt the skincare brand within a month. Your investors are ready to pull their capital today. We cannot survive this level of negative press." I stood up, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. "We are not going to survive it. We are going to completely obliterate it," I replied, turning back to face my terrified staff. "I want you to book the largest, most prestigious grand ballroom at the Four Seasons Hotel in Midtown. I want it booked for this coming Friday evening at exactly 7 o'clock. Spare absolutely no expense. I want top-tier security, premium catering, and a state-of-the-art audiovisual system set up perfectly." The public relations director blinked in rapid, utter confusion, staring. "For what kind of event?" she stammered. I smiled broadly, feeling the intoxicating surge of absolute power coursing strongly through my veins. "For a special announcement," I declared. "Send exclusive mandatory invitations to every major news outlet, every prominent gossip blog, and the entire Atlanta high society network. Invite the investors who are threatening to leave. Invite the retail distributors who paused our contracts. And importantly, send a special VIP invitation directly to the federal regulators overseeing Terrence Vaughn's upcoming audit. My family wants to play their games in front of an audience. I will give them a spectacular show." The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel was a masterpiece of gilded elegance and crystal chandeliers. By 6:45 on Friday evening, the massive space was packed to absolute capacity. I had instructed my public relations team to spare no expense, and they delivered flawlessly. Rows of velvet chairs were filled with Atlanta high society boutique venture capitalists and the very retail distributors who had paused my contracts just days prior. At the back of the room, on a raised platform, dozens of news cameras and prominent local reporters stood ready, their lenses focused sharply on the empty podium. The air was thick with intense, greedy anticipation. Everyone was expecting a public execution. They were expecting the broken, humiliated founder of a dying skincare brand to beg for forgiveness on national television. Sitting dead center in the front row, looking like absolute royalty, were the architects of my supposed destruction. Beatrice wore a solemn black designer dress clutching a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the heartbroken, long-suffering mother. Jasmine sat right beside her, her posture radiating arrogant triumph. Terrence and DeAndre flanked them, wearing expensive tailored suits, whispering to each other with incredibly smug, victorious smiles. They actually believed I was going to hand them a massive settlement check right on that stage to make the media nightmare disappear. They thought they had finally won. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy side doors opened. I did not walk out looking like a defeated victim. I wore a pristine, razor-sharp white pantsuit that commanded the entire room. Two armed security guards flanked me as I walked up the steps to the mahogany podium. The camera flashes erupted instantly, blindingly bright, mimicking the rapid fire of a strobe light. A hush fell over the massive ballroom. I adjusted the microphone, looking directly down into the front row. Beatrice offered me a small, patronizing, fake sympathetic nod, silently urging me to read the apology she assumed I had prepared. "Good evening." I began, my voice steady, powerful and amplified perfectly through the state-of-the-art sound system. Over the past 72 hours, my name, my business, and my personal sanity have been aggressively attacked across every major media platform in this city. You have heard claims of elder abuse, corporate theft, and profound mental instability. My public relations team strongly advised me to stand before you tonight and issue a comprehensive, humble apology to save my brand. I paused, letting the silence stretch out, making eye contact with the reporters in the back. "I am not here to apologize," I stated with absolute chilling clarity. "I am here to present the undeniable objective truth. I am here to show you exactly who the real criminals in this room actually are." Beatrice's patronizing smile vanished instantly. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her velvet chair. Terrence stopped, whispering to DeAndre. "Let us begin with the claim that I am mentally unstable and a danger to myself," I continued smoothly. "My mother and my sister went on television and told this city that I was having a severe manic episode. What they conveniently failed to mention was their highly coordinated illegal attempt to weaponize the psychiatric system to seize my personal assets. Please, direct your attention to the screens behind me." I pressed a button on the podium console. The massive digital screens flanking the stage flickered to life. The high-definition hidden camera footage from my living room began playing. The audio was crystal clear, echoing off the high ceilings of the ballroom. The entire Atlanta high society watched in stunned, breathless silence as my mother and sister broke into my apartment. They watched Dr. Kensington stand there silently. They heard Beatrice's voice ring out through the speakers, sharp and vicious. "Sign the papers. If you fight us on this, Dr. Kensington is fully prepared to sign an involuntary psychiatric hold. The police will come, they will put you in restraints, and the entire city will watch you be dragged out of this building like a rabid animal." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scrambled to record the screens. On the video, Jasmine slammed the documents onto the counter, her voice dripping with sheer greed. "This is a medical power of attorney and a complete financial conservatorship agreement. Sign it right now. It grants Mother and me total legal control over your business, your bank accounts, and your medical decisions." I paused the video right on Jasmine's malicious, greedy face. The ballroom was completely paralyzed. The illusion of Beatrice as a loving, concerned mother was instantly incinerated. She was exposed as a ruthless, manipulative extortionist, willing to lock her own daughter in a psychiatric ward for a paycheck. Beatrice shrank back into her chair, her face draining of all color as she felt the collective disgusted stares of her elite peers burning into her skin. Jasmine looked like she was going to be physically sick. But that is only a fraction of the story. I announced, my voice cutting through the rising murmurs of the shocked crowd. I turned my gaze directly toward the two men sitting frozen in the front row. Because the true financial crime occurring in this city has absolutely nothing to do with my organic skincare brand. It has everything to do with the man sitting right there in the center aisle. I pointed a single finger at Terrence. Terrence swallowed hard, his arrogant posture completely collapsing. Terrence Vaughn claims to be one of the most elite investment bankers in Atlanta. I continued pacing slowly across the stage. Many of you sitting in this very audience tonight have trusted his firm with your retirement portfolios, your commercial assets, and your family trusts. You trusted him because he wore expensive suits and threw lavish parties. What you do not know is that Terrence Vaughn's firm has been completely insolvent for over 2 years. He has been running a massive, highly illegal Ponzi scheme, aggressively embezzling millions of your hard-earned dollars to fund his luxury lifestyle. Outrage erupted in the ballroom. Wealthy investors jumped out of their seats shouting questions. Terrence leaped up, his face slick with terrified sweat. "That is a lie," he bellowed, pointing frantically at me. "She is lying. Do not listen to her. She is a bitter, vindictive fraud trying to ruin me." "I am a woman who brings receipts," Terrence, I replied coldly. I pressed another button on the console. The screen switched from the hidden camera footage to highly detailed, heavily redacted offshore banking documents. I projected his Cayman Islands bridge loan directly onto the massive screens, highlighting the routing numbers, the massive transfer amounts, and the illegal collateral pledges. "Here are the undeniable banking records from just a few days ago." I projected my voice over the chaotic shouting of the audience. "You are looking at a high-interest, illegal offshore bridge loan. Terrence secured to temporarily replace the missing millions before his scheduled federal audit tomorrow morning. And to secure this desperate cash, he forged his wife's signature and secretly mortgaged his mother-in-law's $6 million Buckhead mansion." The wealthy investors in the crowd were screaming now, pulling out their cell phones, desperately trying to contact their wealth managers. The room was descending into pure, unadulterated panic as the elite of Atlanta realized their fortunes had been stolen. Beatrice turned slowly to look at Terrence, her eyes wide with a level of absolute primal horror I had never seen before. Her prized son-in-law had not just embarrassed them, he had literally gambled her entire existence away. But I was not quite finished. I looked down at DeAndre, who was shrinking into his seat, trying to make himself completely invisible. And just in case anyone here still believes this is a fabricated smear campaign, I have one final piece of evidence to submit to the public record: a direct voluntary confession from Terrence's own vice president. I pressed the final button on the console. The clear, undeniable audio recording of DeAndre standing in my kitchen began to play loudly through the ballroom speakers. DeAndre's voice echoed through the room. "Trouble does not even begin to describe it. Terrence is running a massive Ponzi scheme. He has been embezzling millions from his elite clients for the past 2 years to fund his and Jasmine's lavish lifestyle. The cars, the vacations, the designer clothes. It was all bought with stolen client money. He just secured an illegal offshore loan this morning to temporarily replace the missing millions before the auditors arrive. He forged Jasmine's signature and put your mother's mansion up as collateral. He is a criminal, Nia." The audio clip ended, leaving a ringing, devastating finality in the air. The flashing cameras from the press pit went absolutely wild. The reporters had just been handed the financial scandal of the decade on a silver platter. DeAndre covered his face with his hands, knowing his career, his freedom, and his entire life were completely over. He had just incriminated himself and his boss in front of every major media outlet in the state. Terrence was hyperventilating. His eyes darted wildly around the ballroom, calculating his incredibly limited options. He was surrounded by furious investors who wanted to tear him apart with their bare hands. He looked at the main exit doors at the back of the ballroom. Survival instinct took over his cowardly brain. He shoved past Beatrice, knocking her heavy designer handbag onto the floor, and bolted straight up the center aisle. He was sprinting for the heavy wooden exit doors, desperately trying to escape the catastrophic destruction of his fraudulent empire. He reached the back of the ballroom, his hands slamming into the brass handles of the double doors. He pushed them open, ready to run out into the lobby and disappear into the Atlanta night. But he did not make it a single step further. The doors swung wide open, revealing a line of stern, unsmiling men and women wearing dark windbreakers. Emblazoned across the back of their jackets in bright yellow letters were the acronyms FBI and SEC. They had received the VIP invitations I sent along with the comprehensive financial dossiers my legal team had provided them earlier that afternoon. Terrence froze his breath, catching in his throat, as the federal agent stepped directly into the ballroom, completely blocking his only route of escape. The lead agent pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt, the metallic clinking sound cutting sharply through the stunned silence of the room. He reached out, grabbing Terrence firmly by the shoulder, spinning the arrogant investment banker around to face the devastating, inescapable reality of his immediate and permanent downfall. He was completely, utterly ruined, and I watched him fall. Terrence tried to struggle against the firm grip of the federal agents, his suit tearing at the shoulder seam. The lead agent did not hesitate. He slammed Terrence hard against the oak paneling of the ballroom wall. The thud echoed over the crowd. "Terrence Vaughn, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement," the agent declared, his voice booming with authority. "You have the right to remain silent, which I suggest you use." Terrence was hyperventilating, his face pressed against the wood. He looked pathetic. The investment banker was now just a terrified criminal wearing handcuffs. The wealthy investors in the audience, the people who had trusted him with their fortunes, surged forward. They shouted insults, demanding their stolen money back. Hotel security had to form a barricade to prevent the crowd from tearing Terrence apart before the federal agents could escort him out. I stood behind the podium, watching the destruction with a steady heart. The flashing lights of the press cameras illuminated the room like a lightning storm. Reporters were shouting my name, begging for a quote, but I kept my gaze fixed on the front row. Jasmine could no longer maintain her facade. The illusion of her perfect life had shattered into pieces. She scrambled out of her velvet chair, her heels slipping on the floor. She shoved past a photographer and sprinted toward the stage, her face twisted in a mask of desperation. "You ruined my husband!" Jasmine screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cutting through the noise of the ballroom. She slammed her fists against the base of the podium. "You ruined my life, Nia. Tell them to stop. Pay his bail, Nia. We are blood. You owe me. You cannot let them take him away." I looked down at my sister. She was trembling violently, her makeup ruined by tears. She believed she still held some imaginary leverage over me. She thought invoking our shared bloodline would erase a lifetime of her vicious cruelty. I stepped down from the platform, moving with grace. My security detail parted, allowing me to stand face to face with the woman who had stolen my formula and mocked my existence few days ago. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. True power speaks softly. "I ruined nothing, Jasmine," I stated coldly, looking directly into her panicked eyes. "Your husband ruined himself by building a fraudulent empire on stolen money. I simply turned on the lights so everyone could see the cockroaches scattering." "But you have millions," Jasmine sobbed desperately, grabbing the sleeve of my pristine white pantsuit. "You have Julian Pierce's trust fund. You can fix this easily. You can pay the lawyers. You have to save us." I calmly swatted her hand away, smoothing the fabric of my sleeve. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a thick red folder. I held it out to her. "I am not saving you," I replied smoothly. "And frankly, you should be far more concerned about saving yourself. I suggest you look inside this folder, Jasmine. It contains the complete financial breakdown of your luxury real estate brokerage and the deed to Beatrice's massive residential mansion." Jasmine snatched the folder with shaking hands. She flipped it open, her eyes darting frantically across the legal jargon and the glaring red foreclosure notices. She stopped on the final page, staring at the offshore loan contract I had displayed on the screens earlier. "Do you see that signature at the bottom, Jasmine?" I asked, my voice slicing through her remaining sanity. "Terrence did not just steal from his wealthy clients. He forged your exact signature to illegally mortgage Mother's $6 million house to an offshore syndicate. The funds he secured were immediately seized by federal regulators the second those agents walked through the doors. The money is entirely gone." Jasmine gasped, her chest heaving as the catastrophic reality finally hit her. "You do not own your commercial brokerage," I continued relentlessly. "Beatrice does not own her home. Because my company holds the debt and you are officially in default. You are both completely, irrevocably bankrupt. You have absolutely nothing left. Not your business, not your house, and certainly not your fake elite status." Jasmine let out a guttural, horrifying wail. She dropped the red folder, the heavy documents scattering across the floor. She turned toward the lobby doors where the federal agents were currently dragging Terrence away. She screamed his name, but it was not a cry of love. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated hatred for the man who had just signed away her entire existence. As Jasmine collapsed into a weeping, hysterical mess on the ballroom floor, I felt a presence creeping up beside me. It was DeAndre. My opportunistic, cowardly ex-husband had managed to avoid the initial sweep of federal agents. He was slinking toward me, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting nervously toward the exits. He looked like a cornered rat desperately looking for a sewer grate to hide in. "Nia, please," DeAndre whispered, holding his hands up in a pathetic, placating gesture. "You know me. We used to be married. You know I am not a criminal mastermind." Terrence manipulated my ambition. He forced me to steal your flash drive. He forced me to participate in his schemes. I had no idea how deep the fraud went. He stepped closer, attempting to deploy the same manipulative charm he had used to blind me years ago. "I can be an asset to you now, Nia. I know all the inner workings of his firm. I can help your legal team dismantle his remaining accounts. Just give me a job at Pierce Holdings, protect me from the indictment, and I will be loyal to you forever." I looked at the man who had abandoned me when I was struggling, the man who had mocked my dark skin and my big dreams, the man who had tried to destroy my brand just hours ago on a toxic podcast. The absolute sheer audacity of his request was staggering. I slowly tilted my head, offering him a sharp, merciless smile. "You must be confusing me with someone who actually cares whether you live or die, DeAndre." I took a step back and pointed a single perfectly manicured finger directly at the squad of federal agents currently securing the perimeter of the ballroom. "You confessed to corporate espionage and intellectual property theft on crystal clear audio, DeAndre," I declared. Answering, the nearby reporters caught every single word. "You admitted to knowing about the offshore money laundering and the massive embezzlement on a recorded line. You are not a victim. You are an active, willing co-conspirator." DeAndre's eyes widened in sheer terror as two agents spotted him and immediately began marching toward our position. "Nia, you cannot do this," he begged, tears actually forming in his cowardly eyes. "I am your ex-husband, and they have a federal holding cell waiting for you too," I replied coldly. "Enjoy prison, DeAndre. I hear the tailored suits are incredibly limited in there." The agents grabbed DeAndre by both arms, spinning him around and locking his wrists in heavy steel cuffs. He sobbed openly as they read him his Miranda rights and dragged him away, completely humiliated in front of the flashing cameras and the cheering crowd of defrauded investors. With Terrence and DeAndre officially in federal custody and Jasmine weeping uncontrollably on the floor, only one person remained. I turned my attention to the front row. Beatrice was still standing near her velvet chair. The formidable, terrifying matriarch who had ruled Atlanta high society with an iron fist was completely gone. In her place stood a broken, hollow shell of a woman. She was staring blankly at the massive screens, which still displayed the forged loan documents, proving her $6 million mansion was officially lost. The elite friends she had spent decades cultivating were actively backing away from her. The wealthy socialites who used to kiss the ground she walked on were now looking at her with absolute, undisguised disgust. She was a pariah, a toxic, bankrupt liability. Beatrice slowly looked up from the floor, her eyes meeting mine. She looked at the tailored white power suit I wore, the security detail standing behind me, and the absolute, unshakable confidence radiating from my posture. She saw the undeniable reflection of Julian Pierce standing before her. She saw the massive $74 million empire she had desperately tried to steal forever out of her reach. Stripped of her immense dignity, her elite friends, and her stolen wealth, the gravity of her total destruction finally crushed her. Beatrice's knees buckled. She slowly collapsed, falling hard to her knees right in front of the main stage. The blinding rapid-fire flashes of dozens of news cameras captured her complete, devastating surrender, cementing her historic downfall for the entire world to witness. 3 days passed since the magnificent ballroom massacre that completely dismantled my toxic family and their fraudulent empire. The legal fallout was swift and absolutely brutal. Federal authorities froze every single remaining asset tied to Terrence and his failing investment firm. The shocking scandal dominated every major news network and elite social circle across Atlanta. I did not stay to watch the financial vultures pick apart their rotting legacies. I immediately relocated to my new primary residence. It was a breathtaking, ultra-luxury penthouse, occupying the entire top floor of the most secure high-rise in Buckhead. It was a flawless fortress of glass steel and absolute silence. The expansive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the sprawling city below. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the Atlanta sky had darkened into a bruised purple canvas. A massive torrential thunderstorm was actively battering the city, unleashing heavy sheets of rain against the thick reinforced glass of my living room. I stood near the window holding a warm cup of herbal tea, watching the chaotic weather match the violent turbulence I had just injected into my family. My private security director stood silently near the private elevator vestibule. The heavy oak doors securing my penthouse were virtually impenetrable. My smartwatch vibrated sharply against my wrist. I glanced down at the bright screen. It was an urgent notification from the building and its main security desk. I tapped the audio link directly to hear the very urgent message play loudly. Madam the concierge spoke with a deeply tense tone over the encrypted line. We currently have a highly agitated individual standing in the main lobby, demanding to see you immediately. She is completely drenched from the heavy rain and refusing to leave the premises. She vehemently claims to be your biological mother. I took a very slow, highly deliberate sip of my warm herbal tea. The aggressive foreclosure notices had been executed flawlessly. The massive commercial bank had officially locked Beatrice out of her $6 million Buckhead mansion earlier this morning. The reality of her total destruction had finally arrived at her doorstep. Send her up right now, I commanded coldly. I want to see this. The concierge hesitated briefly before confirming the order. 5 minutes later, the private elevator chimed softly. The polished silver doors slid open, revealing the absolute ruin of Atlanta royalty. Beatrice stepped into my pristine marble foyer. She looked completely unrecognizable. Her perfectly styled hair was plastered to her skull, dripping dirty rainwater onto my expensive floors. Her custom-tailored designer dress was soaked through, clinging to her shivering, pathetic frame. Her expensive mascara had run down her cheeks in dark, jagged streaks, making her look incredibly deranged. She was entirely stripped of her fake elite dignity, her wealthy friends, and her stolen money. She was nothing but a desperate, broken shell of a deeply malicious woman. I did not offer her a towel. I did not offer her a warm seat whatsoever. I remained standing near the massive windows, staring at her with zero emotion. Beatrice shivered violently in the center of the foyer, looking wildly around the opulent penthouse. The sheer display of extreme wealth clearly overwhelmed her entirely frantic mind. She realized she was standing inside an empire she could never conquer. Nia, she gasped loudly, her voice cracking under the heavy weight of her total failure. You have to help me right now. They threw me out into the street. The bank agents locked the gates and seized all my belongings. I have absolutely nowhere else to go tonight. I took another slow sip of my tea, savoring the warmth. That sounds like a terrible tragedy, Beatrice, I replied smoothly. You should probably call your favorite golden child for emergency assistance. I am sure Jasmine has plenty of empty space in her own foreclosed property. Beatrice let out a highly dramatic shuddering wail. Jasmine is completely ruined. She is filing for bankruptcy and completely ignoring all my desperate calls. Terrence is sitting in a federal holding cell, waiting for his arraignment hearing. DeAndre is totally blacklisted from every firm. I have absolutely nothing left in this world. She stumbled forward aggressively, trying to play her absolute favorite manipulative card, the false maternal bond. She fell heavily to her soaked knees, right on my pristine marble floor. I birthed you. I gave you life. You owe me a roof over my head. You cannot leave me on the streets. The sheer audacity of her gaslighting was actually phenomenal. She still believed she could twist reality to force me into submission. She genuinely thought her fake tears could erase 3 decades of constant, highly calculated psychological warfare. I looked down at her pathetic weeping form with absolute zero emotion. The icy barrier inside my chest was completely solid. I slowly walked toward her, my footsteps echoing sharply. "You didn't give me life," I stated with lethal cutting precision. "You gave me trauma. You stole Julian Pierce's legacy. You mocked my skin. You humiliated me for sport. The eviction stands." Beatrice stopped crying instantly. The fake tears vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. She stared up at me, realizing the old manipulation tactics were completely useless. "You cannot do this," she hissed viciously, her true nature breaking through the miserable victim facade. "I am your family. You are obligated to protect me. I owe you absolutely nothing, Beatrice. You sacrificed my father to secure your elite status. You allowed your golden child to pour wine on me and steal my intellectual property. You tried to lock me in a psychiatric ward to steal my empire. Family protects each other. You only protected your greed." Beatrice scrambled backward, leaning against the cold wall. "I will make sure the entire city knows you are a cruel, heartless monster," she threatened desperately. "No one will ever love you. They will see you as a complete tyrant. You will die completely alone." Beatrice continued screaming her pathetic, hateful curses as she crawled backward across the marble floor. "You will be utterly miserable without this family. You will die completely alone." I simply smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of profound, brilliant peace washing over my entire spirit. Her hollow words meant absolutely nothing to me anymore. I was immune to her poison. I turned my head and calmly signaled my heavily armed private security detail waiting patiently by the elevator vestibule. Vance stepped forward immediately, his posture radiating pure authority. "Please escort this trespassing individual entirely off my private premises," I instructed him smoothly. "Ensure she is removed from the building immediately and permanently banned from returning." Vance nodded sharply. He reached down, grabbing Beatrice firmly by her soaking wet designer sleeve. He effortlessly hauled her up to her feet. Beatrice shrieked wildly, kicking and thrashing against his unyielding grip. "You cannot do this to me. I am Atlanta royalty. I am your mother," she wailed desperately as Vance dragged her toward the waiting silver elevator doors. The doors slid open instantly. Vance shoved her inside without a single ounce of hesitation. I stood in my pristine foyer watching the woman who had tormented my entire existence finally disappear. As the heavy elevator doors slid shut, severing my toxic mother from my life permanently, I stepped back and firmly closed the massive oak doors of my penthouse forever. The storm outside continued raging wildly, but inside my fortress everything was perfectly beautifully silent. I walked slowly back into my spacious living room, feeling the profound magnitude of my ultimate victory. The heavy rain continued pounding rhythmically against the glass, washing away the filthy residue of my former life. I sat down on my plush velvet sofa, letting out a long, deeply satisfying breath. I had successfully severed every single tie to the poisonous family that had tried to destroy me since birth. I picked up my phone and opened my secure banking application. The balance of Julian Pierce Holdings shone brightly on the screen, a staggering testament to my father's hidden love and brilliant perseverance. I was completely secure. I was incredibly powerful. The grueling 30-year battle for my basic human dignity was officially over. I pressed a button on my console, prompting my favorite jazz record to begin playing softly through the hidden speakers. The smooth melodic saxophone notes filled the luxurious penthouse, effectively drowning out the lingering echoes of Beatrice's desperate, pathetic screams. Tomorrow morning, I would begin aggressively expanding my organic skincare brand into international markets. I would establish the new corporate board for Pierce Holdings, ensuring 50% of the executive seats were filled by brilliant, highly capable Black women. I would use this massive empire to uplift the community my mother had only sought to exploit. But tonight, I simply rested. I closed my eyes, entirely unbothered by the ruins I had left behind. The sweet, undeniable taste of absolute vengeance was perfectly undeniably complete here forever. 1 year has passed since that violent thunderstorm washed away my former life. The empire Julian Pierce left me was operating at a level of unprecedented global success. My organic skincare line, the very brand my mother and sister relentlessly mocked and attempted to steal, was no longer a local boutique operation. It was a massive international phenomenon. Our products were stocked on the premium shelves of every high-end department store from Tokyo to Paris. Today was not about corporate acquisitions. Today was about legacy. I stood on a gleaming wooden stage set up in the heart of downtown Atlanta. The bright midday sun reflected off the glass facade of the newly constructed Julian Pierce Foundation headquarters. I wore a brilliant custom-tailored gold suit, holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. Surrounding me were dozens of highly driven black female entrepreneurs. They were the inaugural class of the Foundation's multi-million-dollar business incubator program. I looked into the cheering crowd, seeing faces of women who had been chronically underestimated by traditional financial institutions. They were women who possessed the same natural hair, the same beautiful dark skin, and the same relentless ambition that Beatrice had always tried to shame out of me. I cut the thick red ribbon, and the crowd erupted into deafening applause. I had successfully transformed the immense wealth of Pierce Holdings into an unstoppable engine for community empowerment. I used the money my father hid in the shadows to pull a new generation of brilliant women directly into the light. As the celebration continued around me, my thoughts briefly drifted to the people who were currently paying the ultimate agonizing price for their malicious greed. The justice the universe served them was absolutely poetic and breathtakingly thorough. The federal prosecutors did not show a single ounce of mercy. Terrence Vaughn, the arrogant investment banker, who thought he owned the entire city, was currently wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. He was found guilty on multiple counts of federal wire fraud, offshore money laundering, and massive corporate embezzlement. The judge sentenced him to 15 grueling years in a maximum security penitentiary. His elite memberships were permanently traded for a cold concrete cell. Jasmine experienced the most spectacular fall from grace in modern Atlanta history. The bankruptcy courts seized absolutely everything she had ever claimed to own. Her luxury vehicles were repossessed. Her designer wardrobe was aggressively auctioned off to pay a fraction of her legal debts. Jasmine was currently working 40 hours a week as a cashier at a deeply discounted beauty supply store on the outskirts of the city. She spent her days scanning cheap lipsticks for minimum wage, completely stripped of her socialite status and entirely erased from the elite circles she used to terrorize. DeAndre, my cowardly ex-husband, fared no better. The audio confession he provided in my kitchen completely destroyed any chance he had of securing a plea deal. He was officially blacklisted from every single corporate entity in the financial sector. He was buried under an insurmountable mountain of catastrophic legal debt, forced to move back into his childhood bedroom in his parents' basement. He was a complete ghost wandering the absolute bottom of the food chain he had desperately tried to climb. And then there was Beatrice, the terrifying image-obsessed matriarch who sold my father to the authorities and used me as a lifelong punching bag. When the bank aggressively foreclosed on her Buckhead mansion, her wealthy friends vanished instantly. The elite women she played tennis with blocked her number. She was utterly shunned by the entire Atlanta high society she worshipped her entire life. She was living alone in a tiny, cramped apartment in a highly undesirable neighborhood. There were no more charity galas. There was only the suffocating silent reality of her own profound, irreversible failure. She was rotting away in the exact prison of obscurity she feared the most. Later that evening, I took my private elevator up to the rooftop terrace of my corporate skyscraper. The air was warm and incredibly clear. The vibrant lights of the Atlanta skyline stretched out endlessly before me. I walked over to the glass barricade, looking down at the massive, sprawling city I now entirely controlled. My phone buzzed softly. I pulled it out and looked at the glowing screen. It was a secure text message from my lead wealth manager at Apex Capital. He sent the finalized, highly detailed reports regarding our staggering quarterly profits. The revenue from the international skincare launch, combined with the flawless restructuring of Pierce Holdings, had generated wealth beyond normal comprehension. I stared at the glowing numbers, my mind flashing back to a time when I desperately checked my bank account, praying for that anonymous $7,000 deposit to clear so I could pay my laboratory rent and keep my business alive for just one more month. I remembered the sheer terror of facing Beatrice's extortion. I remembered feeling incredibly small, profoundly vulnerable, and entirely alone. I gently locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I did not need a stranger to deposit $7,000 to save me anymore. I did not need validation from a mother who hated my skin or a sister who despised my ambition. I was the billionaire. I was the architect of my own destiny. I was the entire empire. I closed my eyes and tilted my head back, taking a long, deep breath of the sweet, unbothered air of absolute freedom. The heavy chains of my toxic past were completely shattered ground into fine dust and blown away forever by the powerful winds of my total, undisputed victory. I opened my eyes and looked out over my glittering, beautiful city. I successfully reclaimed my father's legacy, perfectly avenged his memory, and built a powerful kingdom that would stand for generations to come. The war was definitively won, and my magnificent reign was just beginning. The screen fades to black.